Today I would like to talk about something that no one has been talking about until recently. That's police brutality and racism in America. And if it seems to you that people have been talking about these issues a lot, and that arguably they're some of the biggest issues people have been talking about for quite some time, I know that that can't be right, because Colin Kaepernick's protest, according to a lot of Kaepernick supporters, is being credited with starting the dialogue and getting people talking, as though people weren't already talking about this. Now, the Kaepernick issue has already been beaten to death, and I would leave it alone because it's really gotten pretty silly. You've got people burning his jersey in protest, and that strikes me as being idiotic. People are talking about his socks. Now, those socks were a pretty bad fashion choice, admittedly, but the story's gotten silly. And I could go on about his protest and the parts of it I disagree with and why. But the main reason that I'm talking about it is because I want to discuss the way Kaepernick's supporters seem to want to think that Kaepernick is above criticism. They don't think anyone should criticize him. Well, no one's saying that. Actually, a lot of people are saying exactly that. Takes on Kaepernick have been way too centered on anthem and patriotism, ignoring police violence and broader critique. Instead of getting upset about Colin Kaepernick, maybe we should get upset about what's upsetting Colin Kaepernick and fix it. You get that a lot. Things like, if only people would be more upset by the police violence than they are about an athlete not standing for the anthem. Now, if Colin Kaepernick's protest had nothing to do with police brutality, that would make sense. But because that is what he's protesting, he has made himself a part of the story. And neither Kaepernick nor his protest are above criticism. Nothing is above criticism. People are going to criticize him. They're going to question his motives. And there's plenty of reason for that. It's not as though he did this when he was successful and on top of the world. Now, his career has hit the skids. He's sitting on the bench. People are talking about how he might be cut. And only now does he make this spectacle. See, that makes his motives extremely questionable. That alone. People get to say, well, is that really the reason he's doing this? And we get to talk about that. Kareem AbdulJabbar had this to say: "What should horrify Americans is not Kaepernick's choice to remain seated during the national anthem, but that nearly 50 years after Ali was banned from boxing for his stance, and Tommy Smith and John Carlos's raised fist caused public ostracization and numerous death threats, we still need to call attention to the same racial inequalities. Failure to fix this problem is what's really un-American here." That's a screwed up thing to say. I can fix it real quick. Listen to this version of it. I'm going to block out a few words and move one word around. Americans should be horrified that nearly 50 years after Ali was banned from boxing for his stance, and Tommy Smith and John Carlos's raised fists caused public ostracization and numerous death threats, we still need to call attention to the same racial inequalities. See, that would be an intelligent thing to say. But it doesn't start that way. It starts with, don't criticize Kaepernick, only worry about the things we want you to worry about. And that's not reasonable. For people claiming they want to start a dialogue means you're going to hear criticism, you're going to hear complaint, you're going to hear dissent, you're going to hear other opinions. And Kaepernick injected himself into this story with his protest. He decided to sit during the anthem because he knew it would be controversial. That's how he drew attention to himself so that he could get this message out. That's presuming that's his real motive, and many of us doubt that. But even if that is his motive, controversy. That's how he drew attention to it. You cannot do something controversial and then complain that it's controversial. Why does Kaepernick's peaceful and perfectly legal protest strike more of a chord than, say, killing a man? Funny thing, you can be completely horrified by police abuse of authority and still criticize Colin Kaepernick. They're not mutually exclusive. I wish people were even 1/10 as upset about racial injustice in America as they are about a very peaceful Kaepernick taking a seat. Remind me again, what's he sitting for? Oh, that's the issue he's sitting for, so the two things are connected. Right. Conservative reaction to Kaepernick shows how much they really value freedom of speech. Not one freaking bit. Actually, when conservatives, or anyone else, because conservatives are not the only people criticizing Kaepernick, when they criticize him, they are also exercising their freedom of speech. You're telling me that people should not exercise their freedom of speech in response to freedom of speech? Who is it that doesn't care about freedom of speech here? See, I've heard a lot of commentary like that, where and people seem to want to think that we should ignore Kaepernick and pay attention only to the things that Kaepernick wants us to pay attention to, even though Kaepernick is the thing that drew our attention to it. We're supposed to leapfrog right over him and believe what they want us to believe, or at the very least, listen to their point of view and not offer a whole lot of resistance, I guess. Here's the funny thing. Even if I agreed completely with Colin Kaepernick's stance, I still would not support him. Three of the main things, or maybe the three only things, it's kind of hard to work it all out, but three of the things that Kaepernick refuses to stand for. He's upset about America's treatment of the veterans. Right there with you, that's one. He's upset about police brutality and abuses of authority and how people seem to get by with things that they shouldn't, and I'm right there with him. That's two. He's upset about racial oppression in America. Okay, racism is still an issue in America. I do not believe in racial oppression or systemic racism or any of that. So that's 2 out of 3, possibly even 2.5 out of 3. So it's not as though I'm entirely opposed to the man. See, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say, now everyone must talk about this, but only this, and not the thing we don't want you to talk about. Kaepernick's protest has drawn a lot of attention to Colin Kaepernick, and very little attention, relatively, to the issues that he wants us to talk about. That's another reason why I would not support him even if I agreed with him. Even if I thought his motives were pure, I think that this particular protest is not constructive. I believe in peaceful protest. I believe in intelligent protest. Now, I don't like the Black Lives Matter organization. I don't agree with their stances. I don't agree with a lot of their methods. But a lot of the time, their protests are exactly what they should be. And they're doing exactly what they should. Kaepernick is not. Because when Black Lives Matter holds their protests, they, in an attempt to raise awareness of the issues, they accomplish that. Kaepernick doesn't. Kaepernick draws the spotlight to himself. And people are trying to defeat that by saying, well, don't pay attention to him, don't criticize him. But it doesn't work that way. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, right?
Do you presume to criticize the great Oz, you ungrateful creatures? Oh, the great Oz has spoken. Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Yeah, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Pay attention to what we want you to pay attention to. Kaepernick is also getting credit for a lot of things that really annoy me. My view of him sitting down for the national anthem is the same as Rosa Parks sitting on the bus. Colin Kaepernick is not Rosa Parks. What Rosa Parks did was illegal, and that's why she did it. She was arrested for it. It's called civil disobedience. Colin Kaepernick cannot be arrested for what he's doing. The difference between them is huge. Comparing Colin Kaepernick to Rosa Parks is, in my view, an insult to Rosa Parks. Even if I supported Kaepernick, I still would not even begin to compare the man to someone like Rosa Parks. That pisses me off. Now, some people are more intelligent than this. Take this tweet. I like this. There were several of them like this, but I'm going to start with Susan Sarandon's just because Bull Durham is an awesome movie. I'm with Kendrick, 38, and all the vets supporting Kaepernick. Let's have a dialogue about the reason he's sitting. As far as I'm concerned, what Kaepernick is doing is already working because it's creating so much conversation. That's at least step one. I saw a few of them that I didn't save, so I can't put them on the screen that say mission accomplished because people are now talking about it. But the funny thing is, we're not having a dialogue about these issues. We're only talking about Kaepernick, which is the complaint. I recognize that. But that's the nature of his protest. He did something controversial and created controversy centered around himself, and he became the issue. That's why his protest fails. Just for fun, to see how effective this is, and whether or not mission accomplished is an appropriate thing to say, and whether or not he really has started a dialogue, while I was on Twitter, I ran a little experiment. I opened up 2 tabs, and I ran a search in each one. In one tab, I searched for Colin Kaepernick, and in the other, I searched for Black Lives Matter. And then I didn't do anything else. I just watched to see how many new tweets on each subject would come up. After 2 hours, Black Lives Matter had 355 new tweets. Tweets about Colin Kaepernick numbered 3,086. I did it again, but I opened up 5 different tabs all at once. I did one on inequality, one on racial injustice, one on police brutality, one on oppression, and one on systemic racism. I only ran this one for about an hour. I had limited time. But when you combine all 5 of them together, they still only had 450 new tweets in an hour. Double that, and you've got 900. Kaepernick, 3,086. I did it another time, again for just an hour. I opened up one tab on police violence to see how many new tweets were on that subject. How many tweets were on the subject of just racism, just that one word? Police violence only got 22. Double that because it was only in an hour, that's 44. Racism, 318. Double that, you've got 636. Again, Kaepernick's number in a 2-hour time period was 3,086. We're not talking about the issues. We're talking about Kaepernick. And as much as you would like to blame that on people who were criticizing Kaepernick, it was the style of Kaepernick's protest that created this disparity. He drew attention to himself. If that was his motive, as a lot of people believe, mission accomplished. If, however, he really wanted to draw attention to the issues, then he has failed spectacularly.